The dawn mist clung to Red Mesa like a shroud, turning the sandstone cliffs into ghostly sentinels against the lightning sky. Inez crouched by the San Juan River's edge, his fingers tracing fresh hoofprints in the damp earth. The tracks led downstream, toward the new railroad construction site where Silas Crowley's men had been working through the night. At 26, Kai had spent half his life walking between two worlds, the traditional ways of his Navajo people and the expanding frontier towns that sprouted like tumbleweeds across the territory. His weathered hands told stories of both worlds' calluses from braiding rope and mending fences, scars from breaking horses, and the occasional saloon disagreement he couldn't talk his way out of. The missing horses troubled him. 3 had vanished from his family's herd in the past week, including his father's prize stallion. The old man hadn't said much. He rarely did these days, but Kai had seen the worry lines deepen around his eyes. Without those horses, they'd struggle to move their sheep to winter pastures. As he followed the tracks, the sound of metal on stone echoed across the water. Kai's jaw tightened. There it was. Thick cable stretched taut across the river, anchored by iron stakes driven deep into the banks. Crowley's doing, no doubt. The railroad contractor had been finding new ways to disrupt the traditional paths ever since he'd arrived 6 months ago with his crew of hired guns and promises of progress. The cable hung low enough to snag anything trying to cross during high water. Come spring melt, it would be a death trap for both animals and people. Kai ran his hand along the twisted steel, feeling the cold bite of progress beneath his palm. Mornin', Breed." Kai didn't turn at the voice. He'd heard Deputy Briggs approaching. The man walked like he was perpetually drunk, which he often was. "Deputy," Kai acknowledged, straightening slowly. "Them cables are railroad property. Best keep your hands off, lest you want trouble." Briggs spat tobacco juice dangerously close to Kai's boots. "This is a traditional crossing. My people have used it for generations." "Your people?" Briggs laughed, a sound like gravel in a tin cup. "Times are changin', boy. Railroads bringin' civilization to this dusty hellhole. Your people best adapt or move on." Kai met the deputy's bloodshot eyes steadily. "The law says we have grazing rights here." "The law says what I tell it to say." Briggs's hand drifted to his pistol. "Now get, before I find a reason to lock you up alongside your thieving brother." The accusation hit like a physical blow, but Kai kept his expression neutral. "Toe hasn't stolen anything." "We'll see about that when we catch him with them missing horses." Briggs grinned, showing yellowed teeth. "Whole town knows you Navajos been helping yourselves to livestock. Just a matter of time before we prove it." Kai turned and walked away without another word, his mother's lessons echoing in his mind. Sometimes the wisest warrior is the one who chooses not to fight, but wisdom tasted bitter when swallowed with injustice. The sun had climbed higher by the time he reached Red Mesa proper. The town sprawled along the river like a festering wound, hastily built structures of raw lumber and false fronts, their paint already peeling in the desert heat. The air smelled of horse manure, coal smoke, and the peculiar mixture of sawdust and whiskey that seemed to define frontier settlements. A commotion near the general store caught his attention. A crowd had gathered, their voices carrying on the morning air. Kai recognized several townspeople, their faces flushed with righteous anger. At the center of it all stood Mrs. Yazzie, an elderly Navajo woman who sold blankets and pottery at the market. "I tell you, she was stealing." The accusation came from Mrs. Dutton, the store owner's wife, her pinched face red with indignation. "Mrs. Yazzie stood dignified despite the hostility surrounding her, her weathered hands clutching a small bag of cornmeal. She spoke in halting English. I always pay." "Liar!" someone shouted from the crowd. Deputy Briggs had somehow beaten Kai to town, probably cutting through Crowley's camp. He pushed through the crowd with the authority of a man who enjoyed his power too much. "What's all this now?" Mrs. Dutton puffed up like a bantam rooster. "Caught this squaw red-handed, trying to walk out without paying. It's getting worse every day. Deputy, these people think they can just take what they want. Kai saw the fear flicker in Mrs. Yazzy's eyes. He knew her. She'd helped deliver him and half the Navajo children in the area. The idea of her stealing was as likely as the river flowing uphill. That's enough excitement for one morning. The voice was feminine but firm, cutting through the mob's energy like a clean blade. A young woman stepped forward from the crowd, and Kai found himself studying her with the same intensity he'd used to read signs on the trail. She couldn't be more than 19 or 20, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, and clothing that marked her as newly arrived from the east, the fabric too fine for frontier life, not yet faded by sun and dust. But it was her eyes that held his attention, green as spring cottonwood leaves and blazing with an anger that surprised him.
Mrs. Yazzie paid for her goods. I saw the entire transaction.
The young woman's chin lifted as she faced down the crowd.
I was standing right behind her in line.
Mrs. Dutton sputtered. Well, that is, who are you to interfere?
Evelyn Hart. My father is Reverend Hart. We arrived with the missionary group yesterday.
She turned to Mrs. Yazzie and gently touched her arm.
Are you all right, ma'am?
The crowd began to disperse, their bloodlust deflated by Evelyn's intervention. Briggs looked disappointed as he hitched up his gun belt. Move along, then, squaw, and don't let me catch you causing trouble again. Mrs. Yazzie nodded quickly and hurried away. Evelyn watched her go, then rounded on Briggs with surprising ferocity. How dare you speak to her that way? She did nothing wrong.
Miss Hart, is it?
Briggs's smile was oily. You're new here, so I'll give you some friendly advice. Best not to get too familiar with the Indians. They're not like us. Can't trust 'em far as you can throw 'em.
I'll form my own opinions. Thank you.
Evelyn's voice could have frosted glass in July. Briggs shrugged and sauntered off, but not before shooting Kai a look that promised trouble. The remaining crowd melted away, leaving Kai and Evelyn standing in the dusty street. Thank you, Kai said quietly. Not many would speak up like that. Evelyn turned to face him fully, and he saw her really looking at him, taking in his mixed heritage written in his features, the blend of traditional and modern in his clothing. It was the right thing to do. Mrs. Yazzie seemed like a kind woman. She delivered half the children in this territory, including some who now spit at her in the street. Something flickered across Evelyn's face. Understanding, perhaps, or shame. I apologize for staring. It's just, you're not quite what I expected. Indians rarely are. The words came out sharper than he intended.
No, I mean...
She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. I've been reading about the West for months, preparing for this journey. The books all said, well, they painted a very different picture. You speak perfect English. Mission school, Kai said simply. The Padres were thorough. An awkward silence stretched between them. Evelyn fidgeted with the small notebook she carried. I'm trying to document the real West, not the fantasy sold in dime novels back east. Would you mind if I asked you some questions about your people, your way of life? Before Kai could respond, the acrid smell of smoke bit into his nostrils. Black clouds billowed up from the direction of the mining camp on the town's eastern edge. The fire bell began to clang, its bronze voice carrying panic across Red Mesa. Fire at the miners' quarters, someone shouted. The town erupted into chaos. Men ran toward the blaze with buckets and shovels, while women herded children to safety. Kai sprinted toward the smoke, Evelyn forgotten. The mining camp employed mostly Irish and Chinese workers. Men with families crowded into ramshackle buildings that would burn like kindling. By the time he reached the camp, the largest bunkhouse was fully engulfed. Men formed bucket brigades from the nearest well, but it was like trying to douse hell with a teaspoon. The heat drove them back, flames leaping from building to building with terrifying hunger. My boy is in there. A Chinese woman tried to rush toward the burning building, held back by two miners. Without thinking, Kai grabbed a horse blanket from a nearby wagon, dunked it in a water trough, and wrapped it around himself. The heat hit him like a physical wall as he plunged into the smoke. Inside, visibility was zero, the air itself seeming to burn. He dropped to his knees, crawling forward, calling out in English and what little Chinese he knew. A weak cough led him to a small form huddled beneath an overturned cot. The boy, maybe 6 years old, was barely conscious. Kai wrapped him in the wet blanket and stumbled back toward where he hoped the door was. His lungs screamed for air, his eyes streaming tears that evaporated before they could fall. They burst through the doorway just as part of the roof collapsed behind them. Hands reached out to take the child, to pound out the sparks on Kai's clothing. The boy's mother sobbed with relief as someone checked him over. "He'll be all right." "Doctor," Morrison announced. "Smoke in his lungs, but he's young. He'll recover." As the adrenaline faded, Kai became aware of Evelyn Hart standing nearby, her face pale with shock, but her hands steady as she helped tend to the injured. Their eyes met across the chaos, and something passed between them. An acknowledgement, perhaps, that the real West was far different from anything written in her books. The fire was finally controlled as the sun reached its zenith, leaving 3 buildings in smoking ruins. Miraculously, no one had died, though several miners suffered burns and smoke inhalation. As the crowd began to disperse, Deputy Briggs appeared with a grim expression that didn't quite hide his satisfaction. "Found evidence of arson," he announced loudly. "Oil-soaked rags hidden behind the burned building. And this..." He held up a distinctive leather hair tie decorated with turquoise beads. "Navajo work. Seen Nez wearing one just like it." Kai's blood turned to ice. "That's impossible. Toe would never..." "Save it for the judge." Briggs cut him off. "I'm putting out a warrant for your brother's arrest. Arson, attempted murder, horse thieving. Boy's been building quite a record." "This is madness," the words burst from Evelyn before Kai could speak. "You can't arrest a man based on a hair tie that could belong to anyone." Briggs's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Little girl, you'd best learn to keep your mouth shut about things you don't understand. The good people of Red Mesa don't take kindly to Indian lovers." The slur hung in the air like smoke from the dying fires. Evelyn's face flushed, but she held her ground. "I understand injustice when I see it, Deputy, and I intend to document every bit of it." "You do that?" Briggs's smile was cold. "Just remember, accidents happen in the frontier. Terrible accidents." He turned back to Kai. "Tell your brother he's got until sundown tomorrow to turn himself in. After that, we hunt him down like the dog he is." As Briggs stalked away, Kai felt the weight of the trap closing around his family. Crowley needed the Navajo gone to expand his operations. What better way than to frame them for crimes that would turn the entire territory against them? "Your brother didn't do this." Evelyn's voice was quiet but certain. Kai looked at her, this strange young woman who kept surprising him. "How do you know?" "Because you just risked your life to save a Chinese boy you'd never met. That kind of courage, that kind of decency, it runs in families." She met his gaze steadily. "What will you do?" "Find Toe before they do." Kai glanced at the setting sun painting the mesas blood red. "Warn him. Get him somewhere safe until we can prove his innocence." Evelyn asked softly. The word had slipped out without thought, but as Kai looked at her, covered in soot, clothes ruined, standing firm against the prejudice of her own people, he found he meant it. "This isn't your fight, Miss Hart. Your father won't approve." "My father sent me here to serve God and minister to the needy." Her chin lifted with quiet defiance. "I can't think of a greater need than justice." Thunder rumbled in the distance, unusual for the season. The wind picked up, carrying the promise of rain and harder times ahead, as Kai prepared to search for his brother. He couldn't shake the feeling that this day, this fire, this meeting, had set in motion events that would change everything. The railroad was coming, bringing its own version of civilization. The question was whether people like him and Toe would survive its arrival, or be crushed beneath its wheels like everything else that stood in the path of progress. The evening air hung heavy with the promise of rain as Evelyn made her way to the river with an empty water bucket. The missionary quarters needed fresh water for the evening meal, and she'd volunteered for the task, desperate to escape the suffocating disapproval of the other church women. Word of her defense of Mrs. Yazzie and her public confrontation with Deputy Briggs had spread faster than wildfire through their small community. The San Juan River whispered secrets in the gathering dusk, its voice mixing with the distant rumble of thunder. She knelt at the water's edge, watching the last light dance on the ripples. When footsteps crunched on the gravel behind her, well, the little missionary girl, all alone. Deputy Briggs emerged from the cottonwood shadows, his badge catching what little light remained. The smell of whiskey preceded him like a foul wind. Evelyn's hand tightened on the bucket handle as she stood. "Good evening, Deputy. If you'll excuse me, I need to return." "Not so fast." He moved closer, blocking her path back to town. "You and I need to have a conversation about your behavior today. Can't have you stirring up trouble, undermining the law." "I told the truth. That's hardly stirring up trouble." "Truth," Briggs laughed, an ugly sound. "Truth is what I say it is in this town. And right now, the truth is you're getting too friendly with the wrong sort. That can be dangerous for a pretty young thing like you." Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice steady. "Are you threatening me, Deputy?" "Warning you." His hand reached out, ostensibly to brush dust from her shoulder. "Accidents happen out here. River can be treacherous. A girl could slip, hit her head." "Step back." The command came quiet, but firm from the shadows. Kai materialized from the darkness like a ghost, positioning himself between Evelyn and Briggs. The deputy's hand dropped to his gun. "This is official business. Breed. None of your concern. Miss Hart is under the protection of her father's ministry. Any harm to her would bring federal investigators." Kai's voice remained level, almost conversational. "You wouldn't want that kind of attention on Red Mesa. Would you might uncover all sorts of interesting things." Briggs' face twisted with rage, but something in Kai's steady gaze made him hesitate. After a long moment, he spat at their feet. "This ain't over. Either of you step out of line, and I'll be waiting." They stood in silence until Briggs's footsteps faded into the distance. Evelyn realized she was trembling, the bucket forgotten at her feet. "Thank you," she managed. "I didn't realize that he'd actually..." Men like Briggs see kindness as weakness. Your compassion today marked you as a target. Kai retrieved her bucket, filling it with swift efficiency. "You should stay away from me, from this situation. It will only get worse." "I can't do that." The words came out stronger than she felt. "I meant what I said. This is about justice." Justice. Kai tested the word like a foreign currency. "In my experience, justice is a luxury the powerful sell to the highest bidder." "Then we change that." Evelyn met his dark eyes, seeing surprise flicker there. "I'm not the naive Eastern girl everyone assumes. I've seen prejudice before. Mr. Nez, different faces, same hatred." "Kai," he corrected quietly. "And you've seen nothing like what's coming. Crowley wants our grazing lands for his railroad expansion. He'll destroy anyone in his way. All the more reason to stand against him." She paused, studying his face in the dim light. "Have you found your brother?" Pain flashed across his features. "No, but I know where he might go. There's a place we used to hide his children, up in the canyon country." He hesitated, then added, "I'm meeting someone tonight who might have information, someone who can't be seen talking to me in daylight." The first fat raindrops began to fall, unusual for this time of year. Desert rain came sudden and fierce when it came at all. Kai glanced at the darkening sky with concern. "Storm's coming fast. Let me walk you back." They'd barely made it halfway to town when the sky opened up. Rain fell in sheets. turning the dusty ground to mud in seconds. Lightning split the darkness, illuminating the landscape in stark, white flashes. They took shelter under a rock overhang, pressed against the stone as water cascaded past.
"Who are you meeting?"
Evelyn asked, raising her voice over the storm's fury. Kai seemed to wrestle with himself before answering.
"My brother. He sent word through a friend. He has something, evidence that could expose Crowley's operation, but he needs someone trustworthy to carry it to safety."
"Let me help." "No." The refusal was immediate.
"You don't understand what you're asking. These men have killed for less."
"Then why tell me at all?" He turned to look at her fully, and in the next lightning flash, she saw something raw in his expression. "Because you're the first person in this town to look at Mrs. Yazzie and see a human being. Because you stood up to Briggs when you had nothing to gain and everything to lose." He paused. "Because I think you might be the one person here I can trust." The admission hung between them like a bridge over dark water. Evelyn felt the weight of it, the responsibility and the danger it implied. "Then trust me," she said simply. The rain began to ease, but the ground had turned treacherous. As they made their way back toward town, Kai suddenly grabbed her arm, pulling her behind a cluster of boulders. Through the lessening rain, she saw them, 6 riders moving along the river path, their faces hidden by hat brims and bandanas, hired guns, by the look of them. "Crowley's men." Kai breathed. "They're heading for the meeting place. It's a trap, or they're following the same lead I am." His jaw tightened. "Either way, I have to warn Toe. You can't face 6 armed men alone. I won't face them at all if I can help it." He studied the rider's path, calculating. "There's another route through the arroyos, longer, but I might beat them there if I hurry." "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. You need someone to watch your back, and if something goes wrong, someone who can get word to the authorities, the federal marshals, not Briggs." He started to argue, then stopped. In the distance, one of the riders had turned back, scanning the area where they hid. Time was running out. "Can you ride?" Kai asked. "Since I was 6. "Not side saddle, I mean really ride." "Try me." Against his better judgment, she could see it in his face. He nodded. "My horse is hidden near the old mill. We'll have to share. I couldn't risk bringing 2. They waited until the riders disappeared around a bend, then slipped through the shadows toward the abandoned mill at the town's edge. Kai's paint horse stood patient in the ruins. Seemingly unbothered by the storm, he swung up easily, then reached down to help Evelyn mount behind him. "Hold on tight. The arroyos will be running with water." She wrapped her arms around his waist, trying to ignore how improper this would seem to the church women, how her father would react if he knew. But propriety seemed a small concern compared to a man's life. They rode hard through the storm-dark night, the horse picking its way through terrain that would have been treacherous in daylight. Rain had turned the dry washes into rushing streams, and more than once they had to backtrack to find a safe crossing. Evelyn pressed her face against Kai's back, shielding herself from the stinging rain, feeling the controlled tension in his body as he guided them through the darkness. "There," he said finally, pointing to a cluster of rocks that formed a natural shelter. A small fire flickered within, barely visible through the rain. "He's here." They dismounted carefully, and Evelyn saw another figure emerge from the shadows, younger than Kai, with the same proud bearing but eyes that held a wildness born of desperation. Kai To's voice was rough. "You shouldn't have come." "And who?" "A friend," Kai said quickly. "To, you have to leave! Now! Crowley's men are coming!" "Let them come." To's hand moved to his rifle. "I'm tired of running from lies." 6 of them. One of you. Those aren't odds. It's suicide." Kai gripped his brother's shoulders. "What evidence do you have?" To pulled out a ring of keys, heavy and jangling.
Copied from Crowley's own set, they open his private warehouse near the rail yard. Inside, he paused, glancing at Evelyn with suspicion. She's trustworthy, Kai assured him. Inside are crates of dynamite, barrels of coal oil, more than any railroad job would need. And there's a ledger payments to Briggs, plans for accidents at properties Crowley wants to acquire. Toe's face twisted with bitter satisfaction. He burned out the miners to blame us, to turn the town against any Navajo who won't sell their grazing rights. We need to get this to someone who can act on it. Evelyn said, "The territorial governor, perhaps, or—" The sound of horses cut through the storm. Too close. Kai pushed both Evelyn and Toe toward a narrow crevice in the rocks. "Hide, both of you." "I'm not leaving you," Toe protested. "You're not dying for pride either." Kai's voice held an authority that brooked no argument. "If they catch you with those keys, you'll hang before dawn. Go, now." More horses, shouts carrying on the wind. They were surrounding the shelter, cutting off escape routes. Kai made a quick decision. "Evelyn, can you get Toe to the mission, hide him until we can figure out our next move?" She nodded, though fear made her throat tight. "What about you?" "I'll lead them away. Make them think Toe went upriver." He was already moving toward his horse. "There's a doctor in Holbrook, Isaiah Cole. He's a good man, treats everyone fairly. If you can get the keys to him, he'll know what to do." "Kai," Toe started. "Go!" Kai vaulted onto his horse and spurted into the open, firing his pistol into the air. "Here, he's over here!" The shout worked. In the confusion and rain, the riders turned toward Kai's fleeing form. He led them on a wild chase upriver, away from where Evelyn and Toe crouched in the shadows. "Crazy fool," Toe muttered, but there was deep affection in his voice. "Come on, I know a back trail." They slipped away into the night, Toe leading with the sure-footedness of someone who'd grown up in this harsh land. The rain began to slacken, but the washes still ran high. More than once. Evelyn had to grab Toe's hand to keep from slipping on the muddy slopes. "You're really trying to help us?" he asked as they paused to catch their breath. "Even knowing what it'll cost you with your own people?" "My people should know better," Evelyn replied. "We came here to spread God's word, to help. How is standing by while injustice thrives helping anyone?" Toe studied her with eyes so like his brother's. Kai always did have a weakness for lost causes. They reached the mission as the first hints of dawn touched the eastern sky. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed and gleaming. Evelyn led Toe to the small tool shed behind the main building, hardly comfortable, but hidden from casual view. "I'll bring food and blankets," she promised. "And I'll find a way to get those keys to Dr. Cole." What about Kai? The question she'd been trying not to think about. "He's smart. He knows this land. He'll be all right." The words sounded hollow even to her. Toe handed her the keys, their weight surprising in her palm. "Tell Dr. Cole to look for the ledger in Crowley's office safe. The combination is his daughter's birthday. He's arrogant enough to think no one would know that." He paused. "And thank you for believing us." Evelyn clutched the keys, feeling the magnitude of what she held. Evidence that could bring down Crowley's empire of corruption or get them all killed if she failed. As she slipped back to her quarters, the mission bell began to toll, calling the faithful to morning prayers. She thought of Kai, somewhere in the wild country, pursued by men who shot first and asked questions of the dead. She thought of Toe, hiding like a criminal for crimes he didn't commit. She thought of her father's sermons about righteousness and realized that sometimes faith required more than prayers. It required action, even if that action led you into the storm. The morning after the storm dawned clear and sharp, the desert air washed clean by the unusual rainfall. Evelyn barely slept, the weight of the keys hidden beneath her pillow a constant reminder of the danger they all faced. She rose before the mission bell, slipping out to check on Toe with a basket of bread and dried meat concealed beneath a blanket. "Any word from Kai?" Toe asked immediately when she entered the shed. Nothing yet. She tried to keep the worry from her voice. But that might be good news. If they'd caught him, Briggs would be crowing about it all over town. Toe accepted the food gratefully, but ate like a man with too much on his mind. I shouldn't have let him draw them off. He's always protecting me, even when we were kids. He's protecting more than just you, Evelyn said softly. This is about your whole community, your family's land. Land. Toe laughed bitterly. The whites think we don't understand ownership because we don't fence every inch. But that earth knows us, every spring, every grazing path, every sacred place. Crowley sees empty space to fill with rails and profits. We see generations of our ancestors. Before Evelyn could respond, footsteps crunched outside. She pressed a finger to her lips, heart pounding. The shed door creaked open to reveal her father, Reverend Josiah Hart. His stern face creased with concern. Evelyn. His voice held disappointment and something else. Fear. Come with me, now. She had no choice but to follow, praying Toe would remain hidden and silent. Her father led her to his study in the mission house, closing the door firmly behind them. Deputy Briggs came to see me this morning. He began without preamble. He says you've been consorting with the Navajo man they're hunting, that you were seen riding with him last night. Father, I can explain. Can you? His gray eyes, usually so full of compassion, were hard as flint. Can you explain why my daughter was gallivanting through the night with a savage? Have you any idea what people are saying? That man saved me from Briggs himself. The words burst out before she could stop them. The deputy cornered me at the river, made threats. If Kai hadn't intervened. Deputy Briggs is a representative of the law. Deputy Briggs is a corrupt bully who takes money from Silas Crowley to persecute innocent people. The slap came quick and sharp, more shocking than painful. Evelyn touched her cheek, staring at her father in disbelief. He'd never struck her before, never even raised his voice. Forgive me, he said immediately, his hand trembling. But you don't understand the position you're putting us in. The mission depends on the goodwill of the town. If they turn against us, then perhaps we're ministering to the wrong people, Evelyn said quietly. Christ ate with tax collectors and sinners. He defended the condemned. When did we become so concerned with respectability that we forgot righteousness? Her father sank into his chair, suddenly looking older than his 50 years. You sound like your mother. Mother would have stood against injustice. Your mother is dead. The words fell heavy between them. Killed by men she thought she could reform with kindness and scripture. I won't lose you the same way. Evelyn softened, seeing the fear beneath his anger. I'm not her. Father, I'm careful, but I can't stand by while innocent people suffer. The Navajo boy is hardly innocent. He's accused of arson, of attempting to murder those miners. Accused by a corrupt system designed to steal their land. She pulled out the keys, setting them on his desk with a decisive clink. These open Crowley's private warehouse. Inside is evidence of his crimes. Dynamite, oil, records of bribes. Toe didn't set that fire. Crowley did, to frame him. Her father stared at the keys as if they were serpents. How do you know this? Because unlike the rest of this town, I bother to look for the truth instead of swallowing convenient lies. Even if what you say is true, this isn't our fight. We're here to save souls, not meddle in territorial politics. How can we save souls if we stand by while those souls are crushed by injustice? Evelyn leaned forward, desperate to make him understand. This is our fight. Father, this is exactly why we're here. A commotion outside interrupted them. Shouts, horses, the metallic ring of spurs on wood. Evelyn rushed to the window to see Briggs and 6 men surrounding the mission. Reverend Hart, Briggs's voice boomed. We've got reports of you harboring a fugitive. Need to search the premises. Her father's face went pale. You hid him here. He's innocent, Evelyn said firmly. And he's under sanctuary. Sanctuary is a Catholic concept, not a legal one. But her father stood straighter. some steel entering his spine. "Stay here." He went out to meet Briggs, and Evelyn watched from the window, her heart in her throat. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw her father's gestures become more animated, saw him actually step forward when Briggs tried to push past. Then she saw something else, a familiar figure slipping through the shadows behind the mission. Kai. He was covered in dust and mud, his clothes torn, but alive. Their eyes met across the distance, and he jerked his head toward the shed where Toe hid. Understanding flooded through her. He meant to create another distraction, to draw them off again, but this time, she wouldn't let him sacrifice himself alone. Evelyn grabbed the keys and her mother's medical bag, kept all these years as a remembrance, and slipped out the back. She reached Kai just as he was helping Toe through a gap in the mission fence. "You came back," she breathed. "Couldn't leave my brother to face this alone." He looked exhausted, swaying slightly on his feet. "Lost them in the canyon country, but it won't take long for them to pick up the trail again." "Then we go together," Evelyn said, "all of us, to Dr. Cole in Holbrook." "That's a day's ride through open country. They'll catch us." "Not if we take the old Spanish road through the mesas. My father showed it to me when we first arrived. He wanted me to understand the history of this place." Toe looked skeptical. "That road's been abandoned for decades, half washed out." "But passable," Evelyn insisted. "And unexpected." More shouts from the front of the mission. Her father's voice raised in protest. Time was running out. "She's right," Kai decided. "It's our best chance, but we need horses. The mission keeps 2 in the stable for emergencies." Evelyn was already moving. "I'd say this qualifies." They worked quickly, saddling the horses while Briggs and his men searched the mission buildings. Evelyn's hands shook as she tightened the cinches, very aware that she was crossing a line she could never uncross. After this, there would be no place for her in Red Mesa's polite society. Good, she thought fiercely. She didn't want a place in any society that condoned what was happening here. They led the horses out quietly, using the stable to block the view from the mission front. Just as they reached the trail, her father appeared around the corner. Evelyn's heart stopped. Their eyes met, father and daughter, duty and conscience. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Reverend Hart stepped back, turning his face away. "I saw nothing," he said quietly. "But Evelyn, don't come back. Not until this is resolved. It won't be safe." "Father..." "Go, now, before I remember my obligations to the law instead of my obligations to God." They mounted quickly, Evelyn riding with Toe while Kai took the other horse. As they turned toward the hidden trail, she looked back once at her father's figure, growing smaller with distance. He stood straight and alone, prepared to face whatever consequences came from his moment of moral clarity. The Spanish road wound through country that time had forgotten. Ancient petroglyphs marked the canyon walls, and ruins of old missions crumbled beneath the desert sun. They rode in tense silence, ears straining for sounds of pursuit. It was Kai who heard it first, the rhythmic beat of hooves behind them. Still distant, but closing. "They found our trail." "How?" Toe twisted in the saddle to look back. "Nobody knows this road." "Crowley probably hired Apache scouts," Kai said grimly. "They know every path in this territory." Evelyn's mind raced. They couldn't outrun fresh horses, not with their mounts already tired. But as they rounded a bend, she saw something that sparked hope. A narrow side canyon, barely visible behind a fall of rocks. "There," she pointed. "We hide, let them pass, then double back." "That's Box Canyon," Kai said. "Dead end. If they find us, then we make our stand," Evelyn said with more confidence than she felt. "But they might pass by. It's our only chance." They urged the horses into the narrow opening, dismounting to lead them deeper into the shadows. The canyon walls rose sheer on either side, painted in layers of red and gold. At the back, A small spring had created a grove of cottonwoods, their leaves whispering secrets. They had just gotten the horses settled when the thunder of hooves filled the main canyon. Evelyn pressed against the rock wall, hardly daring to breathe. Kai stood ready with his rifle, though they all knew fighting would be suicide. The hoofbeats slowed, stopped. Evelyn could hear men talking, though the echoes made words impossible to distinguish. Her hand found Kai's, gripping tight as footsteps approached their hiding place. Then, miraculously, the footsteps retreated. The horses moved on, the sound fading into distance. They waited long minutes before anyone dared speak. "They'll realize soon enough we didn't go ahead," Toe said quietly. "Double back to check side canyons. Then we move now." Kai decided, "Push hard for Holbrook. Once we get the evidence to Dr. Cole." He swayed suddenly, and Evelyn saw what she'd missed in their rush blood seeping through his shirt. "You're hurt." "Caught a ricochet last night. It's nothing." But when she insisted on examining the wound, it was far from nothing. The bullet had grazed his ribs, leaving a deep furrow that needed cleaning and stitching. Without proper care, infection would set in quickly in this climate. "We need to stop," she said firmly. "I can treat this, but not bouncing on horseback." "No time," Kai argued, but his face was gray with pain and exhaustion. "Then we make time." Evelyn was already pulling supplies from her mother's bag. "Toe, keep watch. This won't take long." She worked with the efficiency born of watching her mother tend wounded miners and railroad workers. The desert had taught her that infection killed more men than bullets out here. Kai sat still as stone while she cleaned and sutured, though she saw his jaw clench when the carbolic acid bit into raw flesh. "Your mother taught you well," he said when she finished. She believed in being useful. Evelyn tied off the bandage, trying not to think about how solid his chest felt beneath her hands. Said there was no point in faith without works. Sounds like a wise woman. She was. Evelyn busied herself repacking the medical supplies. Father never got over losing her. I think that's why he's so afraid now. Afraid of doing the right thing, in case it cost too much. "And you," Kai's dark eyes studied her. "Aren't you afraid?" "Terrified," she admitted. "But Mother used to say courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it." "Trail's clear," Toe called softly. "But we should move." They rode through the afternoon heat, pushing as hard as they dared. The landscape changed around them, mesas giving way to broader valleys dotted with juniper and piñon. But as the sun began to sink, they faced a new problem. The horses were done, lathered and stumbling. "We'll have to walk them," Kai said, though standing clearly pained him. "There's a trading post about 5 miles ahead. If we can make it there." That's when they heard it. Horses approaching from ahead this time. They'd been outflanked. "The rocks." Evelyn pointed to a cluster of boulders. "We can defend there." They dismounted quickly, taking position among the stones. Kai checked his rifle, handed Toe his pistol. Evelyn gripped her mother's medical bag absurdly, as if it could protect them. The riders came into view, 4 men, hard-faced and armed. But as they drew closer, Evelyn felt a spark of hope. These weren't Briggs' men or Crowley's hired guns. "That's Tom Yazzie," Toe said suddenly. "Mrs. Yazzie's grandson, and those are his cousins." The Navajo riders approached cautiously until recognition dawned. Tom, a young man with intelligent eyes and careful bearing, dismounted first. "Kai, Toe, we heard what happened." His English carried only a slight accent. "Grandmother sent us. Said the white woman who defended her was in trouble for helping you." "How did you find us?" Kai asked. "This old road, our people used it long before the Spanish. We know its secrets." Tom's gaze moved to Evelyn with curiosity and something like respect. "You're the missionary's daughter, the one who stood against the deputy." "I only told the truth," Evelyn said. Sometimes that's the most dangerous thing you can do. Tom turned back to Kai. We brought fresh horses, and word from Holbrook, Doctor. Cole is expecting you. He's gathered some of the other merchants and ranchers who've had trouble with Crowley. They're ready to listen. Hope bloomed in Evelyn's chest. They might actually make it. Justice might actually prevail. As they transferred their gear to the fresh mounts, Tom pulled Kai aside. Evelyn couldn't hear their conversation, but she saw Kai's expression darken. When he returned, worry etched new lines around his eyes. "Crowley's put a bounty on all of us," he said quietly. $500 for me in tow, $100 for you. "I'm flattered to be included," Evelyn said with forced lightness. "This isn't a joke. Every bounty hunter and desperate man in the territory will be looking for us now." "Then we'd better hurry." They rode into the deepening twilight, their Navajo escort flanking them protectively. Stars began to emerge, diamond bright in the clear air. Despite everything, the danger, the exhaustion, the uncertainty ahead, Evelyn felt a strange peace. She was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she should be doing. "Thank you," Kai said suddenly, riding close beside her. "For believing us, for risking everything. I know what it's cost you." "It's cost me nothing I wasn't willing to lose," she replied, "and given me something I didn't know I was looking for." "What's that?" She thought of her comfortable life in Missouri, the predictable future as a minister's wife, the narrow boundaries of acceptable behavior. All of it seemed as distant as the stars above. "Purpose," she said finally. "Real purpose. Not just going through the motions of goodness, but actually fighting for it." "It's a hard path," Kai warned, "and it only gets harder from here." "I know." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm not afraid, not anymore." But even as she spoke the words, she knew they faced their greatest challenges ahead. Holbrook was still hours away, and Crowley wouldn't give up easily. The evidence they carried could bring down his empire, or get them all killed trying to deliver it. The night stretched before them, full of danger and possibility. And Evelyn Hart, minister's daughter turned unlikely outlaw, rode toward it with her head high and her conscience clear. Whatever tomorrow brought, she was ready to meet it. The storm struck without warning. One moment the night sky blazed with stars. The next, black clouds rolled in from the mountains like a stampeding herd. The temperature plummeted, and the first fat drops of rain spattered the dusty ground. "Flash flood weather," Tom Yazzie called out, his voice tight with concern. "We need to get to higher ground." But they were caught in a wide valley, the nearest high ground at least a mile away. The rain intensified, turning from drops to sheets in seconds. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the landscape in stark, terrifying glimpses. "The wash," Kai shouted, pointing to what had been a dry riverbed moments before. Water was already flowing down from the mountains, a brown torrent that grew stronger with each passing second. They spurred their horses toward the valley's edge, but the ground had turned to sucking mud. Evelyn's mount stumbled, nearly going down. She felt the earth giving way beneath them as smaller streams merged into the main channel, creating a roaring wall of water that bore down on them with frightening speed. Ride. Tom's cousins spread out, each picking the best path they could find through the chaos. Evelyn's world narrowed to the horse beneath her, the rain blinding her eyes, the thunder drowning all thought. She lost sight of the others in the downpour, trusting her mount to find its footing in the treacherous terrain. Then disaster struck. A lightning bolt hit a dead piñon tree directly in their path. The explosion of wood and fire spooked her horse, which reared and twisted. Evelyn felt herself flying through the air, the ground rushing up to meet her. She hit hard, rolling down the muddy slope toward the raging water. Her fingers clawed at sage bushes, rocks, anything to stop her slide. But the rain had turned the earth to grease. She could hear Kai shouting her name, but the storm swallowed the sound. The roar of the water grew louder, closer, until she could feel its spray on her face. Just as she was about to plunge into the torrent, strong hands grabbed her arms. Kai had abandoned his horse, sliding down after her, but the bank was crumbling beneath them both now, and his added weight only hastened their descent toward the flood. "The cable!" he shouted in her ear. "Grab the cable!" Through the rain and chaos, she saw it, one of Crowley's construction cables stretched across the wash, installed to ferry supplies. It was their only chance. As they slid the last few feet toward the water, Kai pushed her toward the cable. Her hands found the cold steel just as the current caught her legs. The force of the water was overwhelming. It pulled at her skirts, her body trying to tear her away. Her hands, slick with rain and mud, began to slip. Then Kai was beside her, one arm around her waist, the other gripping the cable. "Hold on," he commanded, though she could barely hear him over the water's roar. But the cable, already stressed by the flood, groaned under their combined weight. Evelyn could feel it beginning to give way, the anchor points loosening in the rain-softened earth. Debris swept past them, branches, fence posts, the bloated carcass of some unfortunate animal. "We have to get to the other side?" Kai began pulling them hand over hand along the cable, fighting the current that tried to sweep them downstream. Evelyn forced her frozen fingers to move, inch by agonizing inch. The water was shockingly cold, stealing the breath from her lungs. Her waterlogged skirts dragged like anchors. Halfway across, a massive cottonwood trunk slammed into the cable. The impact nearly tore them loose, and Evelyn felt her grip failing. "I can't," she gasped. "Yes, you can," Kai's voice cut through her panic. "Look at me, Evelyn, look at me." She turned her head, meeting his dark eyes. Even in the chaos of the storm, there was something solid there, something that anchored her more surely than any cable. "We're going to make it," he said with absolute certainty. "Together. Now move." Drawing on reserves she didn't know she had, Evelyn forced herself forward. The cable sagged lower with each passing second. Just as they reached the far bank, it snapped with a sound like a gunshot. Kai threw himself onto solid ground, dragging Evelyn with him. They collapsed in the mud, gasping, as the cable whipped away into the darkness. "Thank you," Evelyn managed between chattering teeth. "Thank you." But there was no time for relief. The storm showed no signs of abating, and she was shaking violently from cold and shock. Kai pulled her to her feet, supporting most of her weight as they stumbled away from the still-rising water. Through the rain, she glimpsed a darker shadow against the cliffs, a cave or overhang of some sort. Kai saw it too and guided them toward it. The shelter was shallow but dry, carved by wind and ancient waters into the sandstone. "We need fire," Kai said, already gathering what dry wood and brush had collected in the cave's recesses. His hands shook as he worked, and Evelyn realized he was as affected by the cold as she was. The matches in his pouch were soaked, useless, but Tom Yazzie had given him a traditional fire kit as backup. Using a bow drill with practiced efficiency despite his trembling, Kai coaxed smoke and then flame from the tinder. The small fire seemed pathetic against the vast cold of the storm, but it was something. "You're soaked through," he said, not looking at her directly. "You need to, that is, your clothes." Evelyn understood. Wet clothing would steal body heat faster than nakedness, but the thought of undressing here, alone with him, sent a different kind of shiver through her. She thought of all the proprieties she'd been raised with, all the rules about modesty and virtue. Then she thought about freezing to death for the sake of those rules. "Turn around," she said quietly. He immediately faced the cave entrance, feeding more wood to the fire. Evelyn's fingers fumbled with buttons and laces made stubborn by cold and water. Each layer she peeled away felt like shedding the expectations of her old life. When she stood in only her chemise, which was damp but not soaked through, she hesitated. A violent shiver decided her. She wrapped herself in the emergency blanket from Kai's pack wool, mostly dry thanks to its oilcloth wrapping, but she was still trembling. Her lips likely blue in the firelight, Fear and cold, and something else made her voice very small when she spoke. "Will you stay if I undress?" The words came out barely above a whisper, laden with vulnerability she hadn't intended to show. "I mean, fully. I'm so cold, and I'm afraid that something will happen if I'm alone." She saw the tension in his shoulders, the way he held himself perfectly still. "I'll stay, but I won't look. You have my word." "I know," she said softly, and she did. Despite knowing him only days, she trusted Kainez more than men she'd known for years. She removed the damp chemise with shaking hands, wrapping the blanket tightly around herself. The wool was rough against her skin, but blessedly warm. She moved closer to the fire, still shivering, but no longer in danger of hypothermia. "I'm decent," she said, though the word felt inadequate for the situation. Kai turned back, but kept his eyes on the fire. From his pack, he pulled out something wrapped in leather, a necklace of turquoise and silver, old and beautiful. "This was my mother's," he said quietly. "She said it would protect the wearer from harm. I think she would want you to have it for warmth," he added quickly. "The silver holds heat from the fire." He held it out without looking at her directly. Evelyn took it with trembling fingers, the metal indeed warm from its proximity to the flames. As she clasped it around her neck, she felt something shift between them, a connection deeper than mere circumstance. "Your clothes are soaked too," she pointed out. "You should." "I'll be fine." "No," she said firmly. "You saved my life. I won't watch you freeze for the sake of propriety. There's another blanket in my pack. Mother always insisted on carrying two. Turn around." He started to protest, but she fixed him with a look that brooked no argument. With clear reluctance, he turned away. Evelyn stared determinedly at the fire as she heard the rustle of wet fabric. When he was wrapped in the second blanket and seated on the opposite side of the fire, they both relaxed marginally. "Quite the scandal we'd cause if anyone knew," Evelyn said, attempting lightness. "The minister's daughter and the savage, alone in a cave." "Is that what you think I am?" His voice was carefully neutral. "A savage? No." The word came quick and fierce. "I think you're the most civilized man I've met in this territory. You fight with honor, protect those who need it, seek justice instead of revenge. If that's savagery, then civilization is overrated." They sat in companionable silence, listening to the storm rage outside. Gradually, Evelyn's shivering subsided. The fire cast dancing shadows on the cave walls, creating a small world separate from the chaos beyond. "Tell me about her," Evelyn said eventually. "Your mother." Kai's expression softened. "She was a weaver, made the most beautiful blankets. Chiefs from other tribes would trade horses for her work. But she was also—" He searched for words. "Modern, I suppose. She insisted I learn English. Said the old ways and new would have to find balance. Wise woman." "She died when I was 15. Fever took her one winter, along with many others. The agency doctor came too late, with too little medicine." Bitterness crept into his voice. "Crowley's doctor, on the other hand, keeps plenty of medicine on hand, for those who can pay." "It's not right," Evelyn said softly. "None of it is right." "No, but right and real rarely walk the same path out here." He looked at her then. Really looked at her. "Why do you care? Really, you could have stayed silent. Lived a comfortable life as the minister's daughter." Evelyn considered the question, turning the turquoise pendant between her fingers. "My mother once told me that comfort built on others' suffering wasn't comfort at all. It was complicity. She died trying to help miners' families during a diphtheria outbreak. The mining company had refused to pay for vaccines, said it was too expensive." She paused, lost in memory. "I was 12, old enough to understand that she chose strangers over safety, chose righteousness over ease. I hated her for it then. Now I understand." "And your father?" "Never forgave her. Oh, He never said so, but I could see it. He brought us out here to escape the memories. I think to find a place where doing good didn't cost so much." She laughed bitterly. "Instead, we found Red Mesa." The storm began to slacken, rain fading to drizzle, but they were trapped until daylight. The washes would run dangerous for hours yet, and traveling in darkness after such a storm was suicide. "You should sleep," Kai said. "I'll keep watch." For what no one could travel in this. "Habit," he admitted. "Too many nights watching for raiders or worse." Evelyn studied his profile in the firelight. The strong jaw, the weathered lines that made him look older than his years, the weight of responsibility he carried like a second skin. "We'll take turns," she decided. "Partners share the burden." Partners. A small smile tugged at his lips. "Aren't we in this fight against Crowley? For justice?" "I suppose we are." He fed another stick to the fire. "Though it's a strange partnership. The minister's daughter and the half-breed scout. The woman seeking truth and the man defending it," she corrected. "Nothing strange about that." Despite her insistence on taking a watch, exhaustion claimed her. The last thing she remembered was Kai adjusting the blanket around her shoulders, his touch infinitely gentle. She woke to pale dawn light filtering into the cave. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed and gleaming. Kai sat at the cave entrance, fully dressed though his clothes still showed damp patches. He'd kept the fire going all night. "Your clothes are dry," he said without turning. "Mostly, I held them near the fire." She dressed quickly, her back to him, trying not to think about his hands on her garments. When she was decent, she found him packing their few supplies with focused efficiency. "The others?" she asked. Tom's smart. He would have found shelter. But worry creased his brow. "We need to move. The flood will have changed the landscape, but it also erased our tracks." Small blessing. They emerged into a world transformed. The violent waters had carved new channels, uprooted trees, left debris scattered like toys. But the sun was rising, painting the wet rocks in shades of gold and crimson. As they picked their way carefully down to safer ground, Evelyn touched the turquoise at her throat. "I'll return this when—" "Keep it," Kai interrupted. "Like I said, my mother would approve. She always said protecting others was the highest calling." "Is that what you're doing, protecting me?" He paused, turning to help her over a washout. For a moment, they stood close, his hands on her waist, her hands on his shoulders for balance. "We're protecting each other," he said quietly. "That's what partners do." A shout echoed across the valley. Tom Yazzie appeared on a ridge, waving. Relief flooded through Evelyn as she saw the others had survived the night. But as they regrouped, she noticed Toe was missing. "He went ahead," Tom explained. "Thought it best to split up after the storm. Harder to track. He'll meet us in Holbrook with the evidence." Evelyn caught the worry in Kai's eyes. Sending Toe alone was dangerous, but tactically sound. They were all soaked, exhausted, and their horses were scattered. They'd have to proceed on foot until they could find mounts or reach civilization. "There's a mining camp about 5 miles north," one of Tom's cousins offered. "Friendly to Navajo. We can get horses there." As they set off across the storm-changed landscape, Evelyn walked beside Kai. The night in the cave felt like a dream, but the weight of the turquoise against her chest was real. Something had shifted between them in those hours of vulnerability and trust. Something that couldn't be undone. "No regrets?" Kai asked quietly. She thought of her ruined reputation, her father's disappointed face, the comfortable future she'd thrown away. Then she looked at the man beside her, honorable, brave, fighting against impossible odds for justice, and the answer came easily. "None," she said firmly. "Not one." The sun climbed higher, drying the earth and their clothes. Somewhere ahead, Holbrook waited with its promise of allies and justice. Behind them, Crowley's men would be regrouping, the hunt resuming. But for now, in this moment, Evelyn Hart walked beside Kai Nez with her head high and her conscience clear, wearing turquoise and carrying secrets, transformed by storm and circumstance into someone she was only beginning to understand. The girl who had arrived in Red Mesa was gone, washed away like the old landmarks in the flood. In her place walked a woman who understood that sometimes the greatest courage was simply staying when everything told you to run. The morning sun was already fierce when they reached May Turner's homestead, a modest but well-kept ranch nestled in a valley where cottonwoods promised water. The widow Turner had a reputation that preceded her, a woman who'd buried 2 husbands and 3 children to frontier hardships but remained unbowed, running her small cattle operation with an iron will and surprising compassion. She emerged from the barn as they approached, a Winchester cradled in her arms with the casual competence of someone who'd used it more than once. Her steel-gray hair was pinned severely back, but her weathered face softened when she recognized Tom Yazzie. "Tom!" she called out, lowering the rifle. "Your grandmother still making that salve for my arthritis?" "Every month. Mrs. Turner," Tom replied with genuine warmth. "She says you're her best customer." May's sharp eyes took in the bedraggled group, lingering on Evelyn's mud-stained dress and the protective way Kai stood near her. "Storm catch you out nasty one last night. Lost 2 calves to the flash flooding." "We need help," Tom said simply. "These folks are in trouble with Crowley and his men." May's expression hardened at the name. "That snake, been trying to buy my water rights for months. When I refused, had some of his boys run off half my herd." She studied Kai and Evelyn more closely. "You're the ones they're hunting, the missionary's daughter and the Navajo scout." Evelyn started. "I know who you are, girl," May interrupted, not unkindly. "News travels fast out here. They say you chose justice over comfort. That takes backbone." She turned to Kai. "And you defended old Mrs. Yazzie at the market, pulled the Watson boy from that fire. Good people, both of you. Come inside." The ranch house was simple but clean, smelling of coffee and fresh bread. May moved with practiced efficiency, setting out food and pouring strong coffee while Evelyn helped tend Kai's reopened wound. The ride and flood had undone her careful stitching. "Hold still," Evelyn murmured, cleaning the angry red gash. "This needs proper care or it'll go septic." "Listen to her, young man," May advised. "Seen too many fools die from infected wounds out here. Pride makes for poor medicine." As Evelyn worked, Kai explained their situation, the keys weighing heavy in his pocket. May listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with each detail. "Always knew Crowley was crooked as a dog's hind leg," she said when he finished. "But burning out miners to frame Indians, that's a new low, even for him." "We need to get these keys to Dr. Cole in Holbrook," Kai said. "He'll know what to do with them." "Isaiah Cole's a good man," May agreed. "One of the few in these parts who treats everyone fair, regardless of skin color. But Holbrook's still 20 miles, and Crowley's got men watching every road. Then we'll go cross-country." Kai decided. "Not in your condition." Evelyn protested. "That wound needs rest, not hard riding." "We don't have time for rest," he argued. "Every hour we delay gives Crowley more time to cover his tracks." May stood abruptly. Decision made. "You'll stay here today. Rest. Recover your strength. I'll send my hand, Samuel, to Holbrook with a message for Dr. Cole. He can meet you halfway tomorrow with fresh horses and maybe some additional help." "We can't put you at risk," Evelyn said. "If Crowley finds out you helped us." "Let him try something." May's smile was sharp as a blade. "I've been dealing with men like Silas Crowley since before you were born. Girl, besides, I owe Tom's family more than I can repay. His grandfather saved my life once. Long story. This is the least I can do." She bustled out to find Samuel, leaving them in the quiet kitchen. Tom and his cousins excused themselves to tend the horses and keep watch, alone for the first time since the cave. Kai and Evelyn found themselves suddenly awkward. "You should rest," Evelyn said, not meeting his eyes. "May's right about the wound. What happened last night? Kai began. Was necessary, Evelyn finished quickly. We survived. That's what matters. Is it? He caught her hand as she turned away. Evelyn, we need to talk about... The door burst open. Tom rushed in, face grim. Riders coming. 8, maybe 10. Moving fast. Kai was on his feet instantly, swaying slightly. Crowley's men. Can't tell yet, but who else would it be? May reappeared, her ranch hand Samuel beside her, a grizzled black man with kind eyes and steady hands. Into the root cellar. All of you. Samuel, ride hard for Holbrook. Tell Doc Cole we need help yesterday. Samuel nodded and slipped out the back as May ushered them toward a hidden trap door in the corner. The root cellar was cool and dark, smelling of earth and stored vegetables. They huddled in the shadows as boots thundered overhead. Mrs. Turner. The voice was Deputy Briggs, oily with false courtesy. Hope we're not interrupting. Deputy. May's voice was coolly polite. What brings you all the way out here? Looking for fugitives, ma'am. The Hart girl and them Navajo boys. Heard they might have passed this way. Haven't seen anyone but my usual hands, May replied steadily. Storm last night kept everyone hunkered down. Mind if we look around just to be thorough? Got a warrant. Silence. Then Briggs's voice, harder now. Don't need one when pursuing dangerous criminals. On whose authority last I checked, this was still America, not some dictatorship run by railroad money. Evelyn held her breath as footsteps moved through the house above. Beside her, Kai's hand found his gun. She touched his arm, shaking her head slightly. Violence would only confirm their guilt in the eyes of the law. Check the barn, Briggs ordered his men. And that bunkhouse. The search seemed to last forever. Evelyn found herself acutely aware of Kai's presence beside her in the darkness, the warmth radiating from his body, the controlled tension in his muscles. The turquoise pendant felt heavy against her chest, a reminder of the trust between them. Finally, the footsteps retreated. They waited long minutes before May's face appeared in the cellar opening. They're gone, but they'll be back. Briggs left 2 men watching the road. They climbed out to find the house ransacked but intact. May surveyed the damage with disgust. Badge doesn't make a man law, just makes him dangerous with authority. We should leave. Kai said, We've brought enough trouble to your door. Nonsense. You'll stay for supper at least. Give Samuel time to reach Doc Cole. May's tone brooked no argument. Besides, you need food and rest before tomorrow's ride. As evening fell, they gathered around May's table. She'd prepared a simple but hearty meal, treating them like family rather than fugitives. Tom's cousins had spotted Briggs' watchers and marked their positions. We'll create a distraction come dawn. Tom planned. Draw them off while you slip out the back way. This isn't your fight, Kai protested. Isn't it? Tom's usually mild manner sharpened. They burned out Chinese miners and blamed us. They're stealing grazing land our families have used for generations. Every Navajo has a stake in stopping Crowley. May poured coffee, her movements deliberate. Can I see these keys you're risking so much for? Kai hesitated, then pulled out the ring. May studied them with interest. That big one's definitely for a warehouse lock. See the markings Folger Company? They make specialty locks for businesses worried about theft. You know locks? Evelyn asked, surprised. My second husband was a locksmith before he took up ranching. Taught me the trade. May handed the keys back. These are quality. Expensive. Whatever Crowley's hiding. He paid good money to keep it secure. As they talked, Evelyn noticed Kai wincing, his hand going to his wounded side. Without thinking, she moved closer, checking the bandage. You're bleeding again. It's nothing. Stop saying that. Worry sharpened her tone. May, do you have medical supplies? Cabinet by the stove. Help yourself. As Evelyn gathered what she needed, May studied them both with knowing eyes. How long you two been dancing around each other? I don't know what you mean. Evelyn said quickly. Sure you don't. May's smile was sly. Girl doesn't look at a man like that unless there's something there. And he watches you like a hawk with its mate. Heat flooded Evelyn's cheeks. We're partners, fighting for justice. Uh-huh, and I'm Queen Victoria. May stood, stretching. I'll give you some privacy to tend that wound. Tom, boys, let's check the perimeter. When they were alone, Evelyn focused on her task, trying to ignore the intimacy of the moment. Kai sat still as she worked, but she could feel his eyes on her face. May's right, he said quietly, about the way I watch you. Her hands stilled. Kai, I know it's impossible. You're white, educated, from a good family. He gestured helplessly. But when I saw you in that flood, when I thought I might lose you, I realized pretending doesn't change what's true. And what's true? Her voice came out barely above a whisper. That somewhere between you standing up for Mrs. Yazzie and trusting me with your life in that cave, I started falling in love with you. The words hung between them like morning mist, fragile and profound. Evelyn's hands trembled as she tied off the fresh bandage. It's not impossible, she said finally. Difficult, yes, dangerous, certainly, but not impossible. She met his eyes. Because I feel it too. This connection, like I've been sleepwalking through life until now. Your father would never approve. Your community would shun you. They already have. She touched the turquoise at her throat. I made my choice when I rode away from the mission. I choose justice. I choose truth. Her voice dropped. I choose you. He caught her hand, pressing it to his lips in an old-world gesture that seemed to transcend cultures. When this is over, when Crowley's in prison and the danger's past, we'll face whatever comes next, she finished. Together. May cleared her throat from the doorway. Not to interrupt, but Samuel's back, rode like the devil was chasing him. They hurried outside where Samuel sat atop a lathered horse, his face grave. Doc Cole sends word. Crowley knows about the keys. He's mobilized everything, hired guns, railroad security, even some army connections. They're turning Holbrook upside down looking for tow. Did he make it to Doc Cole? Kai asked urgently. No sign of him yet. Doc thinks he might be hiding, waiting for things to cool down. Samuel pulled out a folded paper. Doc sent this map, shows a back way into Holbrook, through the old mining district. Says to meet him at the abandoned stamp mill tomorrow night. It could be a trap, Tom warned. Doc Cole's straight as they come. May insisted. If he says meet him, then that's what you do. Kai studied the map in the lamplight. We'll leave before dawn. Take the long way around. We're coming with you, Tom said firmly. At least to the edge of town. As they prepared for the dangerous journey ahead, Evelyn felt the weight of all they risked, but looking at Kai, seeing the determination in his eyes and the trust in his expression when he looked at her, she knew there was no turning back. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said quietly when they had a moment alone, I want you to know, I regret nothing. These past days, they've shown me who I really am, who I want to be. A troublemaker, he asked with a slight smile. A fighter, she corrected. Someone who stands for what's right, no matter the cost. That's a hard path. Good thing I have a skilled guide. As the night deepened, they made their plans and preparations. May insisted on giving them provisions and ammunition, brushing off their thanks with characteristic gruffness. Just make sure that Snake Crowley gets what's coming to him. That'll be thanks enough. The keys seemed to burn in Kai's pocket. Small pieces of metal that could bring down an empire or get them all killed. But they'd come too far to falter now. Tomorrow, they'd face whatever waited in Holbrook, Crowley's men, the law, maybe even salvation. For tonight, they had shelter, allies, and something growing between them that transcended the barriers the world would put in their way. In a frontier where might too often made right, they'd chosen a different path. And they'd walk it together, come what may. The cottonwood grove by the creek appeared like a sanctuary in the harsh landscape, its canopy filtering the afternoon sun into dancing patterns of light and shadow. They'd been riding hard since dawn, taking May's suggested route through the backcountry to avoid Crowley's watchers. Now, with Holbrook still hours away, both horses and riders needed rest. Kai dismounted carefully, the wound in his side a constant reminder of their dangerous flight. Evelyn was beside him immediately, concern written across her dust-stained features. "You're pale," she observed, touching his forehead. "And warm. The wound might be infected." "We can't stop long," he protested, but his legs betrayed him, trembling with exhaustion. "We stop as long as needed," Tom Yazzie interjected firmly. "Dead heroes save no one." They made a simple camp in the grove's heart, where the creek gurgled over smooth stones and the cottonwood leaves whispered secrets to the wind. Tom's cousins took watch positions while Evelyn tended to Kai's wound with supplies from May's generous provisions. "It's angry but not septic," she pronounced with relief. "Rest and clean water should help." As she worked, Kai studied her face, the determined set of her jaw, the gentle concentration in her green eyes, the way escaped tendrils of auburn hair caught the filtered light. This woman who'd given up everything for justice, for truth, for him. "My mother would have liked you," he said suddenly. Evelyn's hand stilled. "Why do you say that?" She believed in reading people's spirits, not their skin or station. Said the heart shows itself in actions, not words. He caught her hand. "Your heart shines bright as the morning star." "Kai," she began, but he pressed on. "I need to tell you something. About my past, about why Crowley particularly hates my family." She settled beside him on the soft grass, their shoulders touching. "I'm listening." 5 years ago, my father found copper deposits on our grazing land. Nothing huge, but enough to matter. When word got out, Crowley approached us with an offer: sell the land for a fraction of its worth or face consequences. Kai's voice hardened. My father refused. 2 weeks later, our well was poisoned. 50 sheep died before we realized. "That's monstrous," Evelyn breathed. That was just the beginning. Fences cut, horses stolen, my uncle beaten by unknown assailants. His jaw clenched. Then my mother got sick. The agency doctor said it was natural causes, but she'd been strong as an oak. I've always wondered. "You think Crowley had her poisoned?" "I can't prove it, but she died shortly after warning him to leave our lands alone. Said she'd put a curse on any who harmed her family." A bitter smile touched his lips. "Crowley's superstitious enough that it gave us peace for a while. But now, with the railroad expanding—" "He needs your land," Evelyn finished. "And with your mother gone, he's not afraid anymore. Except the curse might be real." Kai said quietly, "Every man who's directly harmed my family has met a bad end. The poisoner drowned in 2 inches of water. The fence cutters lost their way in a sandstorm. Found days later. My uncle's attackers all died of fever within a month." Evelyn shivered despite the warm air. "Coincidence?" "Maybe. Or maybe the land itself protects us. These old places have power, whether you call it God or spirits or something else." He looked at her intently. "Doesn't that frighten you, that you might be caught up in something beyond the merely human?" "What frightens me," she said firmly, "is a world where men like Crowley prosper while good people suffer. If your mother's spirit wants to help balance those scales, I welcome her assistance." The sincerity in her voice seemed to release something in Kai. He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "When I was in that cave with you," she said softly, "I felt safer than I have in years. Not just from the storm, but from everything. Like all the expectations and judgments and fears couldn't touch us there." "I felt it too," he admitted, "like we'd found a place outside the world's rules. What if we could make that real, not hiding in caves, but building something new?" She sat up, eyes bright with possibility. "After this is over, after Crowley's brought to justice. We could go somewhere fresh, California maybe, or Oregon. Somewhere people don't know our histories. You'd leave everything behind your father, your faith community. My faith isn't bound to a building or a town, she said. And my father, he chose fear over righteousness. I can't follow that path. She touched the turquoise at her throat. I'd rather build something true with you than live a lie with them. Tom's whistle, sharp and urgent, cut through the moment. Riders approaching. Kai was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand despite his injury. But as the dust cleared, it wasn't Crowley's men who emerged from the heat shimmer. It was Toe, swaying in his saddle, blood staining his shirt. Brother Kai caught him as he half fell from his horse. What happened? Crowley's men? Toe gasped. Caught me outside Holbrook. I got away, but... He pressed a hand to his side, and it came away red. Evelyn was already tearing strips from her petticoat for bandages. How bad? Bullet passed through. Toe managed. Hurts like hell, but I'll live. The keys. Did you... Safe, Kai assured him. But forget the keys. We need to get you help. No. Toe gripped his brother's arm. Doc Cole. He's waiting. Has others ready to move against Crowley. Federal marshal coming from Prescott. But needs the evidence tonight. Crowley's planning something. Heard his men talking. Another fire. The Chinese quarter this time. Dear God, Evelyn breathed. How many people live there? Hundreds, Tom Yazzie said grimly. Families, children. We can't let that happen, Evelyn said. We have to warn them. It's a trap, Kai said flatly. Crowley knows we won't let innocents die. He's forcing us into the open. Then we spring the trap, Toe said through gritted teeth. But we do it smart. Tom, can your cousins reach the Chinese quarter without being seen? Through the old mine shafts, one of them confirmed. We played there as kids. Go, warn them. Get everyone out quietly. Toe turned to Kai. You and Evelyn meet Doc Cole. Get the evidence to him. You'll rest. Evelyn interrupted. I've patched you as best I can, but you need a real doctor. She's right, Kai said. You're in no shape to fight. Neither are you, Toe shot back. But we don't have choices anymore. Only duties. As Tom's cousins prepared to leave for their warning mission, Evelyn found herself facing a terrible decision. Every instinct said to stay with the wounded, to use her healing skills where they were needed. But the keys weighed heavy in Kai's pocket, and without them, Crowley would never face justice. I know that look, Kai said quietly. You're trying to be in two places at once. People will die if we don't warn them. But people will keep dying if Crowley isn't stopped. Then we do both. He turned to Tom. Can you get my brother to Doc Cole's safe house? There's a back entrance through the old livery stable. What about you two? Kai's smile was grim. We're going to walk right in the front door. Make enough noise that Crowley's men focus on us while you slip through. That's suicide, Toe protested. That's misdirection. Kai corrected. Evelyn, I need you to do something that goes against everything you believe. What? I need you to lie convincingly. Can you do that? She thought of all the deceptions she'd witnessed, all the false pieties that masked cruelty. If it saves lives, yes. They cleaned themselves as best they could with creek water, Evelyn repinning her hair into something resembling respectability. The turquoise went inside her bodice, hidden but present, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. They prepared for what might be their last gambit. Whatever happens, Kai said, catching her hand, know that these days with you have been worth a lifetime. Don't talk like that, she said fiercely. We're going to survive this, both of us. We have plans. Remember California, Oregon, a fresh start. Hold on to that thought, he said. We'll need it in the hours ahead. Tom had horses ready, fresh mounts May had provided, as they prepared to ride in different directions. Toe caught Kai's arm. "Mother's watching," he said simply. "I feel her. She approves of your woman." "She's not my—" Kai began, then stopped. "Because she wasn't she in all the ways that mattered?" "Take care of him." Evelyn told Tom, "We'll see you in Holbrook." They rode toward the setting sun, toward danger and possibly death, but also toward hope. The keys bounced against Kai's ribs with each hoofbeat, small metal promises that justice might yet prevail. "What's our lie?" Evelyn asked as Holbrook's lights appeared in the distance. "That we've had a falling out. That you've come to your senses and want to turn me in for the bounty. That you have the keys and will give them to Crowley for safe passage home. He'll never believe that. He will if we sell it right. You're frightened, exhausted. You've realized what you've given up. You want your old life back." He glanced at her. "Can you make him believe that?" "I was raised to be a proper minister's daughter," she said. "I spent 19 years pretending to be meek and mild when inside I was screaming for something real. Yes, I can lie." "Good, because our lives depend on it." As they approached the town's outskirts, Evelyn felt the weight of what they attempted. So many lives hung in the balance. The Chinese families who might burn in their beds, Toe bleeding from Crowley's bullets, all the future victims if the railroad baron's reign of terror continued. "I love you," she said suddenly, needing him to hear it before they entered the dragon's den. "Whatever happens, I want you to know that you showed me who I really am, who I want to be." "And you showed me that hope isn't just for fools and children," he replied. "That sometimes love is the greatest act of courage." They shared one last look, drinking in each other's faces in the dying light. Then Evelyn Hart, minister's daughter turned frontier fighter, schooled her features into lines of fear and desperation. Time to lie like her life depended on it. Because it did. All their lives did. The lights of Holbrook beckoned like the fires of judgment, and they rode toward them with hearts full of love and purpose. The cottonwoods whispered promises still echoing in their ears. Whatever came next, they would face it as they'd faced everything else, together, with truth as their weapon and justice as their guide. The real battle for Red Mesa was about to begin. The makeshift courthouse in Red Mesa was little more than a converted barn, but Deputy Briggs had done his best to give it an air of authority. Benches had been hauled in from the church, and a raised platform served as the judge's bench, though no real judge was present. This was frontier justice, where men with guns made the law. Evelyn stood at the front of the packed room, her performance so far flawless. She'd stumbled into town at dusk, claiming Kai had abandoned her when the danger grew too great, that she'd barely escaped with the precious keys. Her tears had been convincing enough that even Briggs seemed satisfied. "Tell us again, Miss Hart," Crowley commanded from his seat at the judge's bench, playing at authority. "Where exactly is the savage now?" Evelyn let her voice quaver. "I don't know. He left me outside town, said I was slowing him down, took his brother's horse and rode south, maybe to Mexico." She clutched the keys dramatically. "I just want to go home. Please, Mr. Crowley, I'll give you these if you just let me leave safely." The railroad baron's eyes glittered with greed and suspicion. "And why should I believe you've truly broken with him just days ago? You were defending his kind in the streets." "I was foolish," Evelyn said, injecting self-loathing into her tone. I believed their lies about innocence and justice, but then I saw what they really are. Violent, dangerous." She touched her face where a carefully placed bruise darkened her cheek, courtesy of her own hand, though they didn't know that. "He struck me when I questioned him, threatened worse if I didn't comply." A murmur ran through the crowd. Many of the townspeople had gathered to witness this reversal, drawn by the promise of drama and the possibility of violence. Evelyn recognized faces from the mission, people who'd eaten at her father's table, and saw the satisfaction in their eyes. The minister's daughter had learned her lesson about mixing with savages. She's lying. The voice cut through the murmuring like a blade. Doctor! Isaiah Cole stepped forward from the crowd, his dark face composed but eyes blazing with controlled anger. The elderly black physician commanded respect even from those who'd rather deny it, his decades of service having saved too many lives to ignore. Doc Cole, Briggs warned, hand moving to his pistol. This ain't your affair. Justice is everyone's affair, Doctor, Cole replied calmly. He pulled out a leather portfolio. And I have here evidence that makes this very much my business. Documents recovered from Mr. Crowley's own files, showing payments to you, Deputy Briggs, for various illegal services, including the fire at the mining camp. The room erupted. Crowley surged to his feet, face purpling. Those are forgeries, lies spread by Indian sympathizers. Are they? A new voice entered the fray. May Turner strode through the door like an avenging angel, Samuel at her side, along with 5 other prominent ranchers and merchants. Because I have matching records from the bank, showing withdrawals that correspond exactly to these payments. Evelyn's heart raced. This wasn't part of the plan. Where was Kai had Tom gotten towed to safety? The situation was spiraling beyond their careful choreography. Enough, Crowley roared. Deputy, arrest these troublemakers for disturbing the peace. But Briggs hesitated. Seeing the shift in the crowd's mood, the evidence was too specific, too damning. And more importantly, some of the men with May Turner were powerful in their own right, with connections that went beyond Red Mesa. That's when the doors burst open again. Kai entered, but not as they'd planned. He was supposed to sneak in during the chaos, retrieve the real keys from Evelyn while she distracted everyone with fake ones. Instead, he walked in bold as brass, hands raised but not in surrender. I'm here to confess, he announced, and the room fell silent. To tell the truth about everything that's happened. Kai, no, Evelyn breathed, forgetting her role for a moment. His eyes met hers briefly, conveying trust and something deeper. Then he addressed the crowd. Yes, I ran from Deputy Briggs. Yes, I helped my brother escape false charges, but I'm not the criminal here. He pointed at Crowley. That man is, and I can prove it. Shoot him, Crowley commanded Briggs. He's a wanted fugitive. But Briggs found himself facing not just Kai, but Tom Yazzie and his cousins, who'd materialized from various points in the crowd, not threatening, but clearly ready to act if violence erupted. Let him speak, someone called from the crowd. Others took up the cry, curiosity overcoming prejudice. Kai pulled out a small leather journal. This belonged to Joseph Martinez, the explosives expert Crowley hired to set the mining camp fire. He died last week in a saloon fight, started by Crowley's men to silence him. But he left this with a friend, who brought it to me. He opened the journal, reading aloud detailed plans for the fire, payments received, and most damningly, Crowley's explicit instructions to frame the Navajo for the crime. Lies. Crowley's hand went to his own gun. Deputy, I order you. You order nothing. A commanding voice interrupted. A man in a federal marshal's badge entered, accompanied by 6 armed deputies. Marshal William Pecca from Prescott. We received some interesting telegrams about the situation here. Evelyn nearly sagged with relief. The backup plan had worked. While she and Kai created a distraction, Tom's cousins had reached the telegraph office with copies of the evidence. This is my town, Crowley sputtered. You have no authority. Railroad contracts cross territorial lines, Marshal Peck said mildly. That makes fraud involving them a federal matter, as does mail fraud, which these forged documents certainly constitute. Deputy Briggs, I'll need your gun and badge. The room watched in stunned silence as Briggs, seeing the walls closing in, slowly complied. But Crowley wasn't finished. With a movement surprisingly quick for his bulk, he grabbed Evelyn, pressing a derringer to her temple. Everyone stay back, he snarled. I'm leaving, and she's coming with me as insurance. Time seemed to slow. Evelyn felt the cold metal against her skin, smelled Crowley's sour breath, saw Kai's face transform with deadly intent, but before anyone could act, she remembered May Turner's advice from their brief meeting: men like Crowley expect women to be victims. Use that. She went limp, becoming dead weight. Crowley, unprepared for the sudden burden, staggered. The derringer wavered. In that instant, three things happened simultaneously. Kai dove forward, Evelyn twisted away, and Dr. Cole, with surprising agility for his age, brought his heavy medical bag down on Crowley's wrist. The derringer went off, the bullet going wild, shattering a window. Then Kai was there, his fist connecting with Crowley's jaw with all the force of days of rage and fear. The railroad baron went down like a felled tree. "Well," Marshal Peck observed dryly, "that's one way to enter a plea." The aftermath was swift. Crowley and Briggs were taken into federal custody, along with several of their chief accomplices. The evidence from the keys, which Evelyn produced from her bodice, to Kai's surprise and admiration, led to a warehouse full of incriminating documents. But the real justice came from the people of Red Mesa themselves. Faced with proof of how they'd been manipulated, many felt the shame of their prejudice. The Chinese families who'd been warned away from danger returned to find neighbors offering help rebuilding. Mrs. Yazzie found her market stall surrounded by customers, many mumbling apologies. As the sun set on that momentous day, Evelyn and Kai found themselves back where it all began, by the San Juan River. But now the cables were being removed, the water flowing free again. "That was incredibly brave," Kai said, touching the spot where Crowley's gun had pressed, "and incredibly foolish." "I learned from the best," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "Besides, I couldn't let him hurt you. Not when we have plans to keep." "California?" he asked softly. "Or Oregon, or maybe—" She turned to face him fully. "Maybe we stay. Help rebuild Red Mesa into something better. Your people need advocates. The town needs healing." "You'd stay after everything?" "My mother used to say home isn't a place. It's the people who stand with you." She touched his face gently. "You're my home now." Toe appeared from the shadows, moving carefully but steadily. Dr. Cole had worked his magic, and though he'd need time to fully heal, the danger had passed. "The federal boys won our statements," he reported. "But they said it can wait until morning." He grinned at his brother. "Seems May Turner's invited everyone to her ranch for a celebration. Says it's about time this town remembered how to be neighbors." "Before we go," Kai said, pulling something from his pocket, "there's something I need to do." He knelt by the river's edge, and for a moment Evelyn thought he was praying. Then she realized he was burying something in the sandy bank. "Martinez's journal," he explained, standing. "He was a bad man who did terrible things, but he also told the truth in the end. The river will take his words and cleanse them. It's our way." "Your mother's people have wisdom," Evelyn said, remembering the turquoise warm against her skin. "Our people," Kai corrected gently. "If you'll have us." "I already have," she replied, and sealed the promise with a kiss as the river sang its ancient song beside them. At May Turner's ranch that night, something remarkable happened. Tables were set up under the stars, and people who'd never shared a meal found themselves passing dishes and sharing stories. Tom Yazzie's grandmother sat next to the minister, discussing herbs and healing. Dr. Cole and the Chinese herbalist compared medical techniques. Children who'd been taught to fear each other played tag in the torchlight. Evelyn watched it all from her seat beside Kai, marveling at how quickly walls could fall when people chose courage over fear. Her father had arrived an hour ago, looking older but somehow lighter. Their reunion had been tearful but healing. "Your mother would be proud," he'd said simply, and she knew he meant it. "Look at that," May Turner said, joining them with cups of her famous coffee. "Turns out folks can get along just fine when you remove the snakes stirring up trouble." "It won't last," Toe warned, ever the realist. There'll be other Crowleys, other Briggs. Maybe, May agreed. But there'll also be other Kays and Evelyns, other folks willing to stand up and say enough. That's how the world changes, one act of courage at a time. Marshal Peck approached their group, looking satisfied. Thought you'd want to know. We found more evidence in Crowley's safe. Seems he was planning to do this across the territory. You've stopped something much bigger than you knew. What'll happen to him? Evelyn asked. Federal prison, most likely for a very long time. He tipped his hat to her. Your testimony will be crucial. Miss Hart, you're sure you're willing to go through with it? I've never been more certain of anything, she replied, feeling Kai's hand find hers under the table. As the evening wore on and the stars wheeled overhead, Evelyn reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. She'd left Missouri seeking adventure and purpose, thinking she'd find it in bringing civilization to the frontier. Instead, she'd discovered that true civilization had nothing to do with Eastern manners or proper conduct. It had to do with people like Dr. Cole, who healed without regard to color, like May Turner, who stood for justice despite the risk, like Tom Yazzie and his family, who'd risked everything to help strangers, like Toe, who'd carried evidence despite his wounds, and like Kai, who'd shown her that courage meant standing for truth even when the whole world stood against you. What are you thinking? Kai asked softly, noting her contemplative mood. That I came here to teach, but ended up learning that sometimes you have to lose yourself to find who you really are. And who are you, Evelyn Hart? She smiled, touching the turquoise that now hung openly at her throat, no longer hidden but proudly displayed. I'm a woman who chooses love over fear, truth over comfort, justice over peace. She met his eyes. I'm yours, if you'll have me. I thought I already made that clear, he said with a smile that transformed his usually serious face. You're stuck with me now, through whatever comes next. Good, she said firmly, because I have a feeling our adventure is just beginning. And under the vast western sky, surrounded by new allies and old friends, with justice served and love declared, she had never been more certain that she was exactly where she belonged. The minister's daughter and the Navajo warrior, proof that in the end, courage and compassion could overcome any divide. The river sang its approval, and the stars bore witness to new beginnings. The rain had returned to Red Mesa, but this time it fell gently, washing the dust from the streets without violence. Evelyn sat in Dr. Cole's medical office, helping him organize supplies while Kai rested in the next room. His wound had finally begun to heal properly, though the good doctor insisted on daily checks. You have steady hands, Doctor, Cole observed, watching her prepare bandages. Ever consider formal medical training? My mother taught me what she knew, but... Evelyn paused, the old doubts surfacing. Medical colleges don't typically accept women, especially women with ruined reputations. A reputation? Doctor. Cole's voice carried gentle mockery. Child, you helped bring down one of the territory's most corrupt men. In my book, that makes your reputation sterling. He pulled out a letter from his desk. I have connections at a college in Chicago. Progressive place. They'd be interested in someone with your experience and courage. Before Evelyn could respond, the door burst open. Tom Yazzie rushed in, face grave. Doc, Miss Hart, we have a problem. There's been word from the mountains. Kai appeared in the doorway, instantly alert despite his injury. What kind of word? Crowley's broken out. Marshall's transport was ambushed 2 days ago. 3 deputies dead. The room fell silent. They'd known Crowley had resources, connections, but this? He'll come here, Kai said with certainty. He's not the type to run. He'll want revenge first. The marshals organizing search parties. Tom continued. But Crowley knows this territory. Has hideouts we've never found. Evelyn felt the familiar chill of fear, but pushed it aside. They'd come too far to let Crowley destroy everything now. Then we need to think like him. Where would he go? What would he do? He'd secure resources first. Doctor, Cole mused. Money, weapons, men still loyal to him. The old Benson mine, Kai said suddenly. He mentioned it once when he thought I was considering his offer. Said he kept emergency supplies there. That's a day's ride into rough country, Tom warned. If he's holed up there with armed men. Then we need to be smart about this. Evelyn moved to the window, watching the rain fall on the transformed town. In the past week, she'd seen more change than in the previous months combined. Navajo and White working together to repair the damage Crowley had caused. We can't let fear undo everything we've built. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Reverend Hart entered, looking uncertain. Relations between father and daughter remained delicate, though they were slowly healing. Evelyn, Mr. Nez. He greeted formally. I've come with news from the telegraph office. He held out a paper with trembling hands. It's from Missouri. Your Aunt Margaret. She's passed on. The consumption, finally. Evelyn sank into a chair, the news hitting harder than expected. Aunt Margaret had been the one bright spot in her childhood, the relative who encouraged her curiosity and independence when everyone else preached conformity. I'm sorry, Kai said softly, his hand finding her shoulder. She left you something. Her father continued. The house in St. Louis, and a sum of money, enough to start fresh anywhere you choose. The implication hung heavy. Here was an escape route, a chance to leave the danger and uncertainty behind. Evelyn could return east, use her inheritance to build a respectable life far from the frontier's harsh realities. The timing's providential, Reverend Hart added carefully. With Crowley free, perhaps. No. The word came out stronger than Evelyn intended. She stood, facing her father. I'm not running, not from Crowley, not from the life I've chosen. Evelyn, be reasonable. You've proved your point about justice and equality. But with a madman hunting you, then we stop him, she interrupted. Just like we stopped him before. Her father's eyes flicked to Kai. This is what comes of your association. This is what comes of having courage. Evelyn shot back. Mother would understand. The mention of his late wife silenced Reverend Hart. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. Yes, she would. He straightened his shoulders. Then tell me how I can help. It was an olive branch, unexpected, but welcome. Evelyn felt some of the tension ease. Pray for us, Father, and help keep the peace in town while we're gone. Gone, Kai frowned. Evelyn, you're not thinking... I'm thinking Crowley expects us to cower, to wait for him to strike. She turned to Tom. How many men can we gather, ones who know tracking and can handle themselves in a fight? Maybe a dozen, if we call in favors. Tom calculated. But Miss Hart, this isn't women's work, she smiled grimly. Neither was any of the rest of it. I'm going... That evening, as they prepared for the hunt, Kai found Evelyn in the stable, checking her rifle with practiced efficiency. The turquoise at her throat caught the lantern light. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Yes, I do. She didn't look up from her work. Not out of stubbornness or pride, but because if I hide now, I'll always be hiding. From men like Crowley, from those who say I should know my place, from my own fears. And your aunt's inheritance? Can wait, or... She did look at him then, vulnerability flickering in her eyes. Maybe it could be our Fresh Start Fund. After this is truly over, that house in St. Louis is big enough to be a medical clinic on the first floor, living space above. You and Dr. Cole have been talking, Kai observed with a slight smile. He says Chicago's medical college has graduated 3 women already. That, with his recommendation and my experience... She shrugged, trying for casual. It's just a thought. It's a good thought. He pulled her close, mindful of his healing wound. But first,
We deal with Crowley. Together, she agreed, leaning into his warmth. The rain had stopped by the time their party assembled at dawn. 12 riders in all. Kai and Evelyn, Tom and 3 cousins, Dr. Cole, who insisted his old cavalry experience still counted, Samuel from May Turner's ranch, and 4 townsmen who'd suffered under Crowley's reign. Even Toe had insisted on joining, though his wound still pained him. Marshal Peck had reluctantly sanctioned their posse, knowing they had the best chance of finding Crowley before he disappeared entirely. "Bring him back alive if possible," he'd instructed. "But protect yourselves first." They rode out as the sun painted the mesas gold, an unlikely band united by purpose. The trail to the Benson mine wound through increasingly rough country, forcing them to go single file in places. Kai led reading signs invisible to most, while Evelyn rode beside Dr. Cole, learning field medicine techniques. "You really think she'll be safe?" she overheard Toe ask his brother during a rest stop. "Safe," Kai's laugh was humorless. "None of us are safe, but she has the right to choose her risks, same as us." "She's changed you," Toe observed. "We've changed each other," Kai corrected. "That's what love does." By afternoon, they'd reached the foothills below the mine. Kai called a halt, studying the terrain with narrowed eyes. Fresh tracks, 3, maybe 4 horses, no more than a day old. "Could be anyone," Samuel pointed out. "Could be," Kai agreed. "But look at the shoe marks. Quality horses, well shod, not prospectors or drifters." They proceeded more carefully now, weapons ready. The old mine appeared abandoned, its entrance a dark mouth in the hillside. But Kai's raised hand stopped them 50 yards out. "Smoke," he said softly. "Someone's got a fire going inside." "How do we play this?" Tom asked. Before anyone could answer, a shot rang out. Rock chips exploded near Evelyn's horse, causing it to rear. She controlled it expertly, but the message was clear. They'd been spotted. "Well, well," Crowley's voice echoed from the mine entrance. "The whole righteous brigade, come to visit. How touching." "It's over. Crowley." Kai called back. "You're surrounded. Come out peaceful-like." Surrounded by what, a handful of Indian lovers and a disgraced preacher's daughter? Crowley's laugh was ugly. "I've got supplies for a siege and men who know killing. You've got idealists and fools." Another shot, this one closer. They scattered for cover behind rocks and scraggly pines. Evelyn found herself pressed behind a boulder with Dr. Cole, her heart hammering. "He's got at least 3 shooters," the doctor assessed calmly. "Good positions, too, but limited ammunition, probably." Evelyn reasoned. He couldn't have carried much from the ambush. A plan began forming in her mind. Dangerous, but perhaps their best chance. "Doctor, do you still carry laudanum?" His eyes sharpened with understanding. "Always. You're thinking—" "I'm thinking Crowley's expecting a frontal assault or a siege, not subterfuge." She outlined her idea quickly. It was risky, requiring precise timing and no small amount of acting. But they'd fooled him once before. "Absolutely not," Kai said when she explained. "I won't let you—" "Let me?" Her eyes flashed. "We've discussed this." "This is different. Walking into his gun sights is exactly what he won't expect." She touched his face gently. "Trust me, please." The debate was interrupted by Crowley's voice. "Getting dark soon. Folks, desert gets mighty cold at night. Sure you want to sit out there freezing for principle." "He's getting nervous," Tom observed. "Talking too much." "Then let's make him more nervous," Evelyn decided. An hour later, as shadows lengthened, their plan went into action. Evelyn approached the mine openly, hands raised, stumbling as if exhausted. "Mr. Crowley." Her voice was weak, frightened. "Please, there's been an accident. The doctor, he needs help." "What kind of fool do you take me for, girl?" "Please." She let tears enter her voice.
Kai's dead. Shot trying to rush your position. The others are scattered. I just want to go home. I have money. My aunt died. Left me property. I'll pay for safe passage." Silence. Then, "Step into the light, slowly." She did, making sure he could see her disheveled state. The blood on her clothes, courtesy of a donated rabbit doctor. Cole had been saving for dinner. "Kai's really dead." Crowley sounded suspicious but interested. "Shot through the heart," she sobbed. "Totu, the marshal's given up, gone back to town. It's just me and the doctor and Samuel now. And the doctor's hurt bad." "Show me." This was the crucial moment. She led him partially out, to where they'd staged the scene. Doctor. Cole lay dramatically still. Samuel crouched over him. In the gathering darkness, the laudanum-induced unconsciousness of one of Crowley's own men captured in a brief, silent scuffle passed for Kai's body. "See?" Evelyn gestured weakly. "It's over. We lost. You won. Just, please, let me bury them proper and go." Crowley emerged fully, his remaining 2 men flanking him. Greed and satisfaction warred in his expression. "How much money did your aunt leave?" $8,000. She lied smoothly. "Plus the house. It's yours. All of it. Just let me live." He moved closer, drawn by the promise of funds to rebuild his empire. Closer. Just a few more steps. "You know," he said conversationally, "I always thought you had potential. Too bad you wasted it on—" The dead bodies erupted into motion. Kai rolled and fired in one smooth motion, his bullet catching one guard in the shoulder. "Doctor." Cole's weapon appeared from beneath his coat, covering the other. Samuel produced a shotgun with impressive speed. Crowley went for his gun, but Evelyn was already moving. Aunt Margaret had taught her more than just medicine. She'd also passed on some decidedly unladylike combat techniques learned from a colorful life. Evelyn's boot caught Crowley's wrist, sending his weapon flying, while her fist found his solar plexus with satisfying force. He doubled over, gasping, as the rest of the posse emerged from hiding. In moments, it was over. Crowley and his men were disarmed and bound, the fight gone out of them. "You all right?" Kai asked, checking Evelyn for injuries. "Better than him," she replied, watching Crowley wheeze. "That was reckless," he chided, but his eyes showed pride. "That was necessary," she corrected, "and effective." Marshal Peck was waiting when they returned to Red Mesa. Crowley trussed like a turkey in the back of a wagon. This time, the railroad baron would face federal justice, far from his sphere of influence. "Well done," the marshal said simply. "All of you." As Crowley was led away, he turned back one last time. "This isn't over," he snarled. "I have friends, resources you can't imagine." "So do we," Evelyn replied calmly. "The difference is, ours are built on trust, not fear." That night, the town celebrated properly. The threat was over. Justice served. And for the first time in years, Red Mesa felt like a community rather than a battlefield. Evelyn found herself on the mission steps where it all began. Kai beside her, watching the festivities. Her father had surprised everyone by opening the church for the celebration, saying God's house should welcome all who sought justice and peace. "So," Kai said eventually, "Chicago. Eventually. After we help rebuild here. After your father's land is secure and the new town charter is established." She smiled. "After our wedding. Assuming you're planning to make an honest woman of me. Assuming you'll have a half-breed scout with no prospects beyond his integrity. I'll have the man who taught me courage," she said firmly. "Who showed me that strength comes in many forms. Who trusted me to stand beside him as an equal. Then we'd better talk to your father about dates. Or we could talk to May Turner. She mentioned something about common-law marriages being perfectly legal in the territory." Kai laughed, pulling her close. "Impatient." "Certain," she corrected. I've spent too much time waiting for life to happen. Now I want to live it. The stars above seemed to pulse with approval, and somewhere in the desert, a coyote sang to the moon. Red Mesa spread before them, no longer divided but whole, proof that courage and compassion could triumph over hate. "No regrets?" Kai asked, echoing his question from days before. Evelyn touched the turquoise at her throat, thinking of the journey that had brought them here. The proper minister's daughter was gone, replaced by someone stronger, truer, more fully herself. "None," she said, and meant it completely. Not one single regret. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be other Crowleys, other battles for justice. But tonight, surrounded by friends who'd become family, with the man she loved beside her and a future bright with possibility ahead, Evelyn Hart knew she was exactly where she belonged. The transformation was complete, and it was only the beginning. The morning sun painted the San Juan River gold as the community gathered at the water's edge. The twisted cables that had once threatened both wildlife and people lay in neat coils on the bank, ready for removal. It had taken weeks of cooperative effort, but today marked the final clearing of Crowley's industrial scars from the traditional crossing. Kai stood knee-deep in the gentle current, helping guide the last support post from its moorings. Water sparkled around him as he worked alongside Tom Yazzie and several townsmen who, months ago, wouldn't have acknowledged his existence. Now they labored as neighbors, united in restoring what greed had damaged. "Easy does it," called Samuel, manning one of the ropes. "Don't want anyone getting crushed on our last day." Evelyn watched from the shore, her journal balanced on her knees as she documented the scene. Her writing had evolved from naive observations to nuanced reporting, capturing the complex reality of a frontier town healing from division. The turquoise pendant caught the light as she bent to her work, now as much a part of her as the determined set of her shoulders. "You're chronicling everything." "I see." "Doctor," Cole observed, settling beside her with his own worn notebook. "Good. This story needs telling properly. Too many stories get lost or twisted." Evelyn agreed. "I want people to know what really happened here, how ordinary folks chose extraordinary courage." Speaking of extraordinary, May Turner approached with her characteristic bustle. "The celebration's all arranged. Nothing fancy, mind you, but fitting." The unfancy celebration May had planned already showed signs of becoming legendary. Tables lined the riverbank, and the mingled scents of Navajo fry bread, Mexican tamales, and American barbecue created an olfactory map of Red Mesa's diversity. Children of all backgrounds darted between the preparations, their laughter bright as bird song. "Miss Hart," a shy voice interrupted. Chen Li, the boy Kai had saved from the fire, stood before her with his mother. "We made this for you." He held out a silk square painted with delicate butterflies and desert flowers, east meeting west in perfect harmony. Chinese characters ran along one edge. "It says, 'Courage is the bridge between hearts,'" his mother translated, her English much improved. "For your wedding gift." Evelyn's eyes misted. "It's beautiful. Thank you." She carefully folded the silk and tucked it into her journal. "Will you both come to the ceremony?" "Try keeping us away." Chen Li's mother smiled. "You and Mr. Kai gave us back our lives. The least we can do is witness your joy." As the morning progressed, the river crossing took shape. The last of Crowley's industrial debris was hauled away, and the water ran free and clear. Navajo horses crossed first, their riders whooping with joy at the unobstructed passage. Then came cattle from the American ranches, sheep from the Mexican families, all mingling at the water's edge in a scene that would have been impossible months before. Reverend Hart conducted a brief blessing of the restored crossing, his words carefully inclusive of all faiths present. Evelyn watched her father with mixed emotions. Their relationship remained complex, but he'd grown too, his rigid certainty softened by witnessing true faith in action. "Nearly time," Kai said, appearing at her elbow. He'd changed from his work clothes into his best outfit, a mix of traditional Navajo and frontier practical that somehow suited him perfectly. "For the dedication?" she asked. "For that, too." His smile held secrets. "But first, there's something else." He led her to the cottonwood grove where they'd sheltered during their flight from Red Mesa. The massive trees stood unchanged, their leaves whispering ancient stories. But now a small gathering waited in the shade. Mrs. Yazzie, Tom's grandmother, Kai's father, and surprisingly, Evelyn's Aunt Margaret's closest friend from St. Louis, Mrs. Catherine Blackwood. "Aunt Catherine," Evelyn gasped. "How, Your young man wrote me," the elderly woman said, her patrician features warm with affection. "Said if I wanted to see you married proper, I'd better come quick. Barely gave me time to pack Margaret's wedding dress." She produced a box that Evelyn recognized, her mother's dress, carefully preserved, which Aunt Margaret had saved all these years. The ivory silk had aged to a warm cream, its simple elegance timeless. "I don't understand," Evelyn said, looking between them all. "May Turner was right about common-law marriages," Kai explained. "But I wanted to give you something more. Both our traditions, both our families, blessing our union properly." "Mrs." Yazzie stepped forward with a traditional Navajo wedding basket, its intricate patterns telling stories of creation and harmony. "In our way, marriage joins not just two people but two families, two paths becoming one journey." What followed was unlike any ceremony Red Mesa had witnessed. Under the cottonwoods, with the restored river singing nearby, Evelyn and Kai exchanged vows that bridged cultures. Her father read from Corinthians about love's patience and kindness. Kai's father spoke in Navajo about the sacred nature of commitment. Mrs. Yazzie wrapped them in a traditional wedding blanket while Aunt Catherine pinned Margaret's cameo to Evelyn's dress. "In my culture," Kai said, his voice carrying clearly, "we say marriage is a journey to the center of the universe, two people finding their way together. You've already walked with me through flood and fire, danger and triumph. Will you continue this journey, wherever it leads?" "In my tradition," Evelyn replied, her voice steady despite tears of joy. "We promise to have and to hold, for better or worse. But you've already shown me both, the worst of what people can do, and the best of what we can become together. Yes, I'll continue our journey, always." The celebration that followed merged naturally with May's riverside gathering. No one questioned the mixing of ceremonies, the blending of traditions. It simply felt right, like Red Mesa itself was finally becoming what it was meant to be. As the afternoon wore on, Cole pulled the newlyweds aside. "That letter from Chicago came through. They're expecting you this fall. Evelyn, full scholarship. Thanks to some generous donors who were impressed by your story." "Donors?" Evelyn questioned. "Anonymous, but I have my suspicions." His eyes twinkled. "Seems stopping a corrupt railroad baron made you some powerful friends." "And you, Doctor?" Cole asked Kai. "What will you do while your wife studies?" "Chicago needs guides too," Kai said with quiet confidence. "Urban tracking's different from desert work, but people are people. Someone needs to help folks navigate between worlds." "Plus," Evelyn added, "he's been corresponding with a professor of anthropology who's interested in preserving Navajo oral traditions. Seems my husband's about to become a scholar too." As sunset approached, the entire community gathered for one final ceremony. Toe had recovered fully and stood with a group of young people, Navajo, Mexican, Chinese, and white, who'd formed an unexpected alliance during the Troubles. "We've decided," Toe announced, "to create a council, all peoples represented, all voices heard. What happened with Crowley can't happen again if we stand together." "Here, here," May Turner called out, raising her cup. Others echoed the toast. Evelyn found herself standing where it all began, by the river where Briggs had first threatened her, where Kai had appeared like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known she was praying. So much had changed. The frightened girl who'd clung to propriety was gone. replaced by a woman who understood that true faith required action, that real love demanded courage. "Regrets?" Kai asked, joining her at the water's edge, his arm settling comfortable around her waist. "Never," she said firmly. "Though I do wonder what Mother would think of all this." "I think she'd be proud," Reverend Hart said, approaching with 2 cups of May's legendary coffee. "Scared for you, perhaps, but proud. You've done what she always dreamed, made faith real through works." "We all have," Evelyn corrected, gesturing to the mixed gathering. "Every person here chose change over comfort, right over easy." As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, someone started singing, an old hymn that transcended denominations. Other voices joined in, harmonizing across languages and cultures. The simple melody rose above the river's song, a promise that some things unite us all. Later, in the quiet of their own celebration, Kai gave Evelyn a final gift, a journal, leather-bound and beautiful, with her new initials embossed on the cover, N. "For your new stories," he explained, "the ones we'll write together." "Our story's already begun," she reminded him, thinking of all they'd overcome. "This is just the next chapter." "Then let's make it a good one." Under the vast western sky, with the river running free and their community celebrating around them, they sealed that promise with a kiss. Whatever challenges lay ahead, the journey to Chicago, the years of study, the work of building bridges between worlds, they'd face them as they'd faced everything else together, with courage, with love that transcended every barrier the world could place between them. In the distance, a train whistle sounded. Not Crowley's corrupt empire, but the legitimate railroad that would connect Red Mesa to the wider world. Progress was coming, inevitable as sunrise, but now they knew it didn't have to mean destruction. With wisdom and courage, the old and new could coexist, even thrive together. "Will you stay?" Evelyn asked playfully, echoing that desperate question from the cave that now seemed a lifetime ago. "Always," Kai promised, understanding passing between them. "Wherever you go, whatever you become, I'll be there." "Good," she said, leaning into his strength. "Because I plan to become quite a lot. Doctor, writer, advocate, troublemaker when necessary." "I wouldn't expect anything less from the woman who faced down Crowley and won." "We won," she corrected. "All of us, together." And together they stood, watching the stars reflect in the free-flowing river, proof that love and justice could triumph over any obstacle. Their wedding day was ending, but their real journey, the adventure of 2 hearts united in purpose and passion, was just beginning. The West would never be the same. And that, Evelyn thought with satisfaction, was exactly as it should be. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale. Are you listening during your commute, relaxing at home, or perhaps on a long drive through your own frontier? Please share your thoughts and location in the comments below so we can connect and discuss this journey together. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Tales, give this video a like, and hit that hype button to help more listeners discover these tales of courage and love in the American frontier. Your support helps keep these stories alive.